So, in today's lesson, we are continuing our journey through the Old Norse conjugation. More specifically, we look at the different types of weak verbs. To be more specific, only the first conjugation. You see, since the resources I'm using are referring to the different kind of conjugations as first to fourth conjugation rather than first to fourth class of weak verbs, I shall do so too. So, Old Norse weak verbs fall into broad 4 categories, which means different conjugations. And the first one has approximately 500 verbs and is thus the largest. And the fourth one, with approximately roundabout 30 verbs, is the smallest. So, to make it as simple as possible, let us look at each group one by one, and in this lesson we will focus solely on the first conjugation weak verbs, also known as the A conjugation. So, we have actually already encountered one of the first conjugation weak verbs, kalla, which means to call, to shout, or to name. Others include svara, which means to answer, to reply, or to respond, and tala, which means to speak, to talk, or to make a speech. And if we are now looking at the endings, you realize they all end in a, and this a is between the verb root and the attached ending in the singular. For example, han kallar, he calls, han svarar, he answers, and han talar, he talks. Now, a little side note here. Han is the masculine version of the third person pronoun singular, so he or it. Hon is the feminine version, so she or it. And that is the neuter version, so that or it. Now, the it translation for all three refers to the grammatical gender of nouns. You see, for example, the feminine noun sol, which means sun, is not really a she, but an it. And so is hestre, which means horse, and is a masculine noun, but not really a he. But for the plural, there is no a. For example, their kalith, you'll call. Their svarith, you'll answer. And their talith, you'll talk. And this is why we have two stems, a singular stem with a, for example, kalla, svara, talla, and a plural stem without a, for example, kall, svar, tal. So, with all of that in mind, let us now look at the first conjugation, also known as the A conjugation. So, we will look at the present tense, active, indicative. So, we have the two verbs, kalla, which again means to call, and leeta, which means to seek. And the conjugation is as follows. We are starting with the first person singular, then the second, then the third, and then the first, second, and third person plural. So, kalla, kallar, kallar, kollum, kallith, kalla. As for leeta, we have leeta, leetar, leetar, leetum, leetith, leeta. Now, you may wonder, what is in first person plural? Why does it look so different? Well, If you remember, in the previous lesson for Sindarin, we have actually something very similar, the E affection. You see, in Old Norse, we have something called U-Umlaut or U-mutation, which is basically a rule of vowel harmony, where a stressed A in a word changes to O, when followed either by an U or V in the next syllable. Thus we are having A plus U or V becomes O. And if you now also remember, which we said in a previous lesson in Old Norse, it is always the first syllable of any given word that is stressed. You have all you need to know about that. Also, very important, if you look at the noun land, which is the singular, becomes in plural land. And that despite the fact that there is no U or V. And that is because originally the Proto-Norse plural ending was landu. And thus, when we see something like this, which seems a bit irregular, just remember this. You can think of this as an invisible U-Umlaut. And again, this is very similar to our last lesson about Sindarin and the E affection. So, you can see already that even in such situations, we can find similarities across various languages. And to be honest, this is one of the reasons why I have decided to put Old Norse and Sindarin on the current language plan. I wanted to show you how we can make language acquisition, when there are a lot of languages on your learning list, much easier, simply by finding patterns and similarities, or the exact opposite, contrasts via differences. Makes it much easier. Well, that's it for today's lesson already. In the next lesson, we will look at the second conjugation, and maybe a little bit more.